So if you are new to Northway, or you have been here for 30 plus years, welcome. Like seriously, I am honored that you are here today. All of us, we're at different places as we seek to understand and discover faith. So regardless of where you're at in that journey, you are always welcome here at Northway. And if this is your very first time ever at one of our Northway locations, man, you picked a great weekend to be here, because we launch a brand new series today titled Stuff Christians Say. I've been developing and anticipating this series for about 6 months, and I'm really excited to launch it. So before we dig in, though, I just want to pause and celebrate something with all of us for a couple minutes. This past Tuesday, our East End, Dormont, and Oakland churches gathered at our Oakland location. And our Beaver Valley, Sewickley Valley, and Wexford churches gathered at our Wexford location for a night of worship and baptisms. And nearly 70 people were baptized. And if you were there, yeah, go ahead, man. Across all locations. Seriously, that's a big deal, right? And if you were there and you helped lead in any way, thank you so much for serving. And let me just say this. If you were one of the 70 or so that were baptized, can I just speak directly to you for a minute? But I think this applies to all of us. Baptism at its foundation is obedience. It is simply obeying what Jesus revealed that we should do. So when we obey, I believe that what comes next is revelation and blessing. So maybe you're one of the folks that got baptized and you were facing a really challenging decision, or there's a lot going on in your life, and you stepped out in obedience and were baptized. I want you to pay attention, because God is going to bless your obedience with revealing something to you. Maybe you were stressed out and there's a lot of anxiety or something overwhelming in your life, and you stepped out in obedience and you were baptized. Be ready for God's peace and clarity to come to bless you for your obedience. See, folks, I don't obey God so that I can somehow avoid his punishment. I'm going to obey you, God, because I don't want you to crush me. Man, I want to obey God, because by obeying him, I know that he's going to reveal his direction and his blessings on me. See, out of obedience, whether it's baptism, whether it's being generous, whether it's serving someone in need, whether it's just coming to church, obeying God and coming to church, it's there in that obedient moment that he blesses and he reveals. So if you are baptized, pay attention and look for his revelation. So stuff Christians say, right? I mean, all groups of people, all tribes or whatever, all of us, we have insider language, phrases that are unique to whatever your particular sort of tribe or thing is. A couple examples, if you like to camp, I don't know why you would, but if you like to camp, you have your own insider camper language, right? Stuff that campers say. Here's an example, taking a Tarzan. Anybody know what that means in camper language? That means going to the bathroom in the woods. That's what campers say. I got to take a Tarzan, which I love, by the way. I just think that's hysterical. Regardless of what group you're in, you have insider language. If you're a nurse, you have insider language. Nurses understand phrases that they communicate with one another. So if you've got a patient that is constantly pressing the call button, right? Overly needy, always upset or offended at something, nurses refer to them as an FMP, a fluff my pillow, right? They change shifts and they say, man, in room 11, there's an FMP, right? Are you an FMP patient? You might know. Are you like that person that gets a cold and you're an FMP? Overly needy, right? I'm a boxing fan. I run around in boxing circles, right? So we have our own language. Rabbit punch, glass jaw, check hook, orthodox stance, shoe shine, neutral corner. I know what those all mean because that's stuff that boxers say. So like campers and nurses, boxers, Christians also have their own insider language, don't they? Right? And sometimes if you're new to the church or new to faith, So some of the stuff that Christians say is just weird, right? Right? You just don't understand it. And you can almost feel like you're like a foreign exchange student in some kind of distant land. So a while back, I don't even know how long ago, I saw this video that these two guys, and they actually work at a church, they're hysterical. These two guys put together like sort of a spoof, just sort of making fun at some of the stuff that Christians say. So take a look at this. Okay, so 2 questions for all the Christians today. First question, how many of you say some of that stuff in the video? All right? All right, second question, don't raise your hand on this one. How many of you got a little upset? Maybe even a little offended by something that was said? Someone said to me once, I think Christians are the most easily offended people group on the planet. And sometimes I think that might be true. See, I take my faith in my Jesus really serious. Jesus changed me, saved me, restored me. However, Christians, as Christians, I think when we are relating to a world that does not know Jesus, we need to lighten up a bit. I think we need to stop expecting non-Christians to be Christians, to believe and act and understand what we do and what we say. I think there might be too many FMPCs out there. Fluff my pillow Christians. Pressing the call bell a little too often. Often just a little too upset and easily offended. You didn't see that coming, did you? That's called a check hook. It's my favorite punch. It gets you to drop your guard down, hit you with a check hook. Yeah. See, in this series, we want to challenge Christians to stop saying 3 things that I hear Christians say. They are not any of the phrases from the video, by the way, okay? So you can keep saying traveling mercies and sweet fellowship and son of a bee sting all you want, right? You can just go ahead and say that stuff all you want. In fact, we're not even going to tell you the 3 things that we're going to cover each week in advance for fear that you might skip a week, might go camping or take a Tarzan. I just love saying that. I just think that's so funny. However, I do want to put some of you at the rest. We're not going to talk about money or tithing in any of these weeks, okay? My intention in this series is to bother you a bit, is to maybe provoke you. This is not a fluff my pillow series. In this series, I really want to have us all attempt to stop saying some things that I don't think are helpful and I don't think they're biblical. So here we go. Are you ready? Are you sure? James 2:14 says this, "What good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can that faith save him?" Jesus' brother James here, he's basically saying out that faith without action, it's meaningless. Can that faith save him, he said. That's really like a rhetorical question. If you pull the sort of Greek apart about what's being said here, basically James is saying, that faith can't save him, can it? It's a rhetorical question. Of course not. He goes on to say this, if a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, go in peace, be warm and filled, without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that? A couple things in that verse. He said, if you notice, 1, if a brother or sister. So what he's saying there is if a fellow Christian is in dire need, right? 2, poorly clothed and lacking daily food. If you pull that apart and you really look at what it means naked and starving. And lastly, that phrase that's used, that go in peace, that was actually a phrase that was very commonly used at this time by the Gentiles, by non-believers, when they came across someone that was in need or struggling. And then James concludes with a very challenging language. He says, so also faith by itself, if it does not have works, it's dead. He's basically saying faith that just walks by the person that's naked and starving is a faith facade. because the person's still starving and you didn't do anything. See, I believe that James is deliberately making an exaggeration here, right? So because, for you to come across someone that's like naked and starving and to say to them, hey, go in peace and be warm and be full, that would be ridiculous for you to say, right? So let's not exaggerate it, right? Let's not use something that dire or that sort of unbelievable. Let's use some things that maybe you will come across or people may come to you with that are believable. Like, what would you say to someone if they have sort of approached you and were to say, man, I just got diagnosed with cancer? If they were to say to you, I have a drug addiction that I cannot beat. My husband just told me that he's leaving. My mother just passed away. We just had a miscarriage. What would you say to them? Are those things maybe still too big? Right? They're still too ominous maybe. So let me bring it down a little bit more. How about if someone were to just say to you my car broke down. My wife and I, we are so disconnected. We're just fighting all the time. I just moved to the city and I'm just struggling to navigate it. Our basement just flooded. I didn't get into the college that I always dreamed of. We got a newborn at home. We haven't slept in days. See, James is saying that a Gentile or a non-believer's common response in this time would have been, go in peace. Be warm. Be filled. Good luck. What is the modern phrase that is commonly used today when we hear of someone's difficulty, someone's bad news, someone's crisis? I think it's this: my thoughts are with you. See, I gave you a heads up earlier that I was going to try to bother you and provoke you a little bit. Because I think as Christians, we need to stop saying that. Because frankly, it's not much different than go in peace. Be warm and be filled. If someone were to approach you and say, my mother passed away, my thoughts are with you, that's not very helpful. I don't even think it's biblical. How about if we were to say, I'm so sorry. I'm going to bring a meal over Friday or Saturday. Which day is better for you? Someone comes to you and says, my wife and I, we're so disconnected. We're fighting all the time. My thoughts are with you. How about if we were to say, I'm going to come over and babysit your kids on Friday. I want you guys to go out and have a night together and really talk. I'm new to the city. How about pick a Saturday? I want to show you around the city that I love. I have an addiction issue that I can't beat. My thoughts are with you. How about let's get you some help? And I'll tell you what, I'll go to the first meeting with you. And if you haven't told your parents yet, I'll come with you. We'll tell them together. In times of crisis, in extreme trouble, I don't think people need your thoughts. They need your presence and your action and your compassion. Or as James puts it, they need your deeds. And not deeds to just make you look good publicly or to earn points with God. Rather, deeds and actions that reveal faith and demonstrate the hope and love of God through you. So I know that probably some folks in the room right now are, Scott, I don't really actually say that. What I say, Scott, is I say that my thoughts and prayers are with you. And then I pray for them. Hey man, praying for someone's huge. It's crucial. It's so important. But if I could I just push you a little bit here? Are you really praying for them when you say that? Like seriously? Are you writing them in your prayer journal and praying for them day after day after day? Are you praying like it's your own issue? Or you maybe even fasting for them. Are you going to God on their behalf and asking for wisdom and guidance? Because here's what I think, or at least here's what I experience. When I'm seriously committed to praying for somebody over something, a difficulty or a trouble or like a crisis in their life, as I pray and I listen to God, you know what God almost always says? He tells me to go do something for them. I could leave it there, but I'm not. I put this up on the screen. I believe that most of the time the phrase, my thoughts and prayers are with you, has become the spiritualized way of abandoning the responsibility of being involved in other people's lives and trying to meet their brokenness with the love of God. You can churn on that for a second. There's a miracle story that's found in all 4 of the Gospels. It's Jesus feeding the 5,000. And the backdrop of all 4 of these accounts is thousands and thousands of people have gathered around Jesus. And it says that he is overwhelmed with compassion. See, in this entire day, these crowds they're astonished by Jesus' miracles. They're drawn to his teaching. And in this crescendo moment, sometime towards the end of the day, this is what's recorded. Now the day began to wear away, and the 12, so the disciples, came to him, Jesus, and said, send the crowd away to go into the surrounding villages and countryside to find lodgings and get provisions, for we are here in a desolate place. The disciples basically are saying, we are in the middle of nowhere. We don't have the resources or food for these people. Jesus, send them home. I love what Jesus says next. You give them something to eat. Folks, I think a lot of people want God to give them more influence, but God is far more interested in giving us more compassion. If you want more influence or impact or leadership, then we must be willing to expand our circles of concern and compassion. Because compassion, it leads to influence. See, I believe with all my heart that all of us have so much more capacity to care inside of us that is just waiting to be unleashed. I love working with leaders, and specifically emerging leaders. However, I'm not interested in helping everyone I meet become a better leader. Why? I don't want to help some folks become better leaders until they are better people. See, the world doesn't need more leaders. The world needs more compassionate people that lead. Jesus never used his power to show off. He used his power because he cared about people. I'll just ask you a question. How many people are in your current circle of concern and compassion? Right? How many people do you deeply, you care for, you're compassionate about, you're there for them? Right, if you're married, it's your spouse, right? If you got kids, it's your kids. It's probably maybe your parents are in there, and there's probably some other sort of random people in there. But I think for some of us, our circle of compassion and concern, it's too small. It's like a hula hoop on the ground, right? And there's very little room in there for many other people because it's a small little group and we're sort of tightly pushed in there. When somebody outside comes to you with a crisis or a difficulty or something really going on in their life, because you're sort of in this small little circle of concern and compassion, sometimes all you got is, my thoughts are with you. The disciples were trying to move these people out of their circle. What are they saying basically to these folks? My thoughts are with you, but go home. Be safe. Safe journeys, but go home. Did you notice they didn't even ask Jesus if he had any ideas or thoughts on what we might do for this crisis, for this difficulty, for this situation? No, they just wanted them sent. Man, if there's people in your life right now that are experiencing a crisis, before you dismiss them or tell them that my thoughts are with you, at least we should stop and ask God, God, do you want to do something here? Is there something you want me to do? So next, what Jesus does is he asks the disciples, how many loaves of bread do you have? Go and see. Go talk to the people. Go and see. And when they found out, they said 5 and 2 fish. Basically, what Jesus is saying here is, what do you have to bring to the table? There's 5,000 famished men, plus women and children, and Jesus is saying to the disciples, tell me what you got. And when God puts someone in crisis in your life, one of the best things that can happen, I think, is this crisis from this other person comes to you, they bring it to you. One of the best things that could happen is for you to say, man, I don't know what to do. I'm not even sure that I can help them. This is big. I don't have the network or the influence or the resources. Why do I say that's one of the best things that could happen? See, when you are overwhelmed by your smallness compared to the bigness of the problem, you're in a sweet spot. Why? Because now it's about God's bigness and not your awesomeness. Now you can really rely on God to do something. Because here's what he does next. And taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to the heaven and said a blessing, and he broke the loaves, and he gave them to the disciples to set before the people, and divided the 2 fish among them all. And they all ate and were satisfied. The disciples, they gave Jesus what they had. He blessed it, he broke it, he gave it back to them, and they fed the 5,000. A lot of people refer to this as Jesus feeding the 5,000. He gave it back to them. The disciples actually then distributed it and fed the people. This miracle, it curbed 5,000 people's appetite so they could make it home. But it must have blown the disciples' minds, right? See, if we give God what we got, if we give Jesus what we got, he will give it back to us transformed. Because what he wants to do is he wants to take all of your gifts and your hurts and your pains and your successes and your history and your resources. He wants to bless them, break them, make them new, and give them back to you so that you can use. God wants to do things in you, not just for you. God wants to do things through you, not just for you. If you only want to receive from God, God cannot give you all he wants to give you because you're a dead end. But if you will be a channel, he's going to give you an unlimited amount of compassion and resource because he knows he can trust you with it. If you give away compassion, you'll have unlimited compassion. If you give away love, not just thoughts, you'll have unlimited love. I just want to challenge us. Can we stop saying my thoughts are with you? Because my thoughts are with you, what it really is, it's sympathy. See, and I believe there's a really big difference between sympathy and empathy. Empathy, it fuels connection. Sympathy, it drives disconnection. Empathy, it's the ability to engage the perspective of another person. Empathy stays clear of judgment. You don't judge when you're being empathetic of the person that's coming to you with the issue. Empathy feels the emotion that the other person is experiencing. You feel what's happening in their lives. Empathy is connected deeply to presence, not just thoughts. If someone cries out from a deep hole, from a deep pit, And they cry out and they say, I'm stuck and it's dark and I'm overwhelmed down here. Empathy climbs down into the pit with them and says, I don't know what to do and I don't know what to say, but I'm not going to leave you alone. Sympathy says, oh, wow, man, I'm sorry. My thoughts are with you, and keeps on walking. Sympathy is thoughts. Empathy is a choice to act. There's this sort of ancient Jewish tradition. It's called sitting Shiva. See, when someone was mourning, maybe they lost a loved one, the community would gather around the one that is grieving and sit Shiva with them. The mourner, if the mourner wanted to talk and tell stories about their loved one, then those that are sitting Shiva with them would talk and they'd engage in stories with that person. If the mourner wanted to simply be quiet and weep, those that were sitting Shiva with them would be quiet and they would cry with them. Sitting Shiva, it meant you brought lots of food over to the person's house. You cared for their kids. You cleaned their house if that was what was needed. And when they would do this, they would recite this verse out of Isaiah to the person and sort of over the house. Isaiah 60, it says this, they would recite this, no more will your sun set, not your moon be darkened, for God will be an eternal light for you. And your days of mourning shall end. And what would happen is eventually, when the deep pain of this person would subside, when the crisis had just even lifted slightly, what the person would do, the mourner, would get up and leave the house and walk around the block. And those that had been sitting Shiva with that mourner would get up also. And they would all walk around the block together, symbolizing that the worst had passed. Man, can you just hear this from your lead pastor? I want to be a sitting Shiva church, not a my thoughts are with you church. My guess is that you know people right now that are not quite ready to walk around the block yet. The crisis hasn't lifted. The pain is still there. And they need more than your thoughts. They need your presence. They need your compassion. They need your generosity. They might need your food. They might need their kids cared for or their house cleaned. They need to know they're not alone. Does someone come to mind? Act on it. I want to sort of declare a prayer over you. Across all of our locations, will you stand up? Let's just all bow our heads and pray. And I'm just, as I wrote this week, I'm just praying that maybe God's going to put somebody on your heart. So let's all pray together. God, if you place someone on the minds of the people across all of our 6 locations, would you give them the compassion and the courage and the resource to act? And if there is someone right now across our campuses today that for whatever reason no one has come to mind in this moment, Lord, would you have someone in need cross their path this week? My prayer, Lord, is that we would not respond with my thoughts are with you. Rather, we would answer with compassion and reveal your love through our response. In your Son's name, amen.